Good morning, everyone. Man, I want to welcome everyone who's joining us online or from one of our 4 other campuses. So good to be here today. My name is Levi. I serve as the campus pastor here in Greece. And today we are in our last week of our series called Walking Free as we've been going through the book of Galatians, and I'm really excited to wrap it up, to finish it up. And that being said, if you've missed any of the sermons in this series, you can always go back to crosstownalliance.com and you can rewatch any of them that you missed. For those of you who don't know, some of you might know that I've had an up and down relationship with diet and exercise. I have. I don't know if that resonates with you at all, but I think in the last decade, I've gained and lost the same 30 pounds 5 different times. And here's one of the reasons for that is because I start out with this goal. Maybe it's a weight loss goal. Maybe it's a fitness goal. I want to exercise. I want to eat healthier. I just want to be a more healthy individual. And I get a plan together. And I go to town. I get to work. And I'm kind of like an all or nothing kind of guy. You can ask my wife. I just kind of go all the way over here and then all the way over here. But what happens is I get into the plan. I get into the routine of it. I go. And then somewhere along the way, deep within my soul, there is a longing for ice cream. In bed. Before I go to bed. And it starts with one bowl of ice cream, and then it's the next day, and then the next day. Before you know it, I'm just every night, that's my evening routine. And what it does is that bowl of ice cream at night ruins all of the work that I put in throughout the day. And anyone, can you relate? You know what that's called? Yeah, you know, yeah. No, don't clap for that. Don't clap for that. You know what that's called? It's called sabotage. I'm sabotaging myself. I'm sabotaging my own dreams and goals and aspirations. I'm sabotaging my pursuits in life. Anyone ever sabotage themselves? Yeah, I'm not proud of it. I'm not proud of sabotaging myself, but it does illustrate what we're going to be talking about today, how he wraps up his letter to the churches in Galatia. And here's the heart of the text today. Sometimes we let lesser pursuits sabotage our greater pursuits. We let the lesser things sabotage the greater things. Sometimes the pursuit of the bowl of ice cream before bed sabotages all the other work I put in to eating healthy and exercising. Similarly, in our pursuit of Jesus, you are all on a pursuit of Jesus. There are lesser pursuits. They're so subtle and yet will sabotage our relationship with God. There are lesser pursuits that will get in the way, where on the outside it will appear that we're doing all the right things and checking all the right boxes, but there's something deep down inside of us that is destructive to a life of faith. One of our values, we put it up on the wall. God is the goal. You see it up on the wall at all of our campuses. You can see it up on the wall. It might not be over there. It might be over there. I'm not sure where it is. It says God is the goal. It's actually one of our first values. The way that we say it is this, is God is the goal. We believe there is no greater pursuit in life than knowing God. There's no greater pursuit. We put it up on the wall, most importantly, because we want it to be lived out in our life. Not just a value on the wall, but in our life. So if God really is the goal, God is the target on our life, and he is the ultimate pursuit. There's no greater pursuit. It means this, that all other pursuits are lesser pursuits. They're lesser pursuits. They're secondary pursuits to the pursuit of God. If God is the goal, it means this, that the dream college, the dream job, the dream house, the dream family, the dream vacation, the dream wedding, the dream neighborhood, the dream boat, the dream husband, the dream wife, the dream retirement. They're not bad things. They're just secondary things. They're lesser things. They'll never compare to the ultimate pursuit in life, which is to know God. So what if I told you that you, church, at all of our campuses, you might have some lesser pursuits that are sabotaging your pursuit of God? Would you want to know? I hope so, because that's what we're going to be spending the rest of our time today on. Now, before we get into the text, we're going to be in Galatians chapter 6, starting in verse 11. This is the end of Paul's letter, okay? This is the end of Paul's letter to the churches. So I want to give you just a brief I just want to catch you up, and I'm sorry if we're being redundant. Paul's the one writing the letter, not us. We're just following the letter. And so if I'm redundant and you've heard this a million times, just bear with me. The churches in Galatia were encountering a group of people known as the Judaizers, who were teaching Christians that in order to really follow Jesus, you really want to follow Jesus, you have to get circumcised, you have to follow Jewish ceremonial law like eating kosher, and you have to celebrate certain Jewish holidays. And the main thrust of Paul's message to these churches has been, don't listen to these guys. Don't listen to the Judaizers. You don't need to get circumcised to follow God, thank God. You don't have to eat kosher to follow God. You don't have to celebrate certain holidays to follow God and pursue a relationship with God. You don't need to. You've been freed from those things. That's why our sermon series has been called Walking Free. You are free from those things. You don't have to follow those things. So the obvious question that Paul's going to answer this morning in the last part of his letter is, if you don't need to do these things, why would these guys come in and say that you do? Why would they come in and say that you have to do all this stuff when you don't really have to, when God's not requiring you to do all this stuff? So that's what Paul is going to get at. He's about to answer the question by letting us know the motive behind this way of teaching. So we're going to jump in. Starting in verse 11, he says this, "See with what large letters I am writing to you with my own hand." I want to stop there just for a second. Paul says, I'm writing this part of the letter, which might sound redundant to most people, because if you're writing a letter, why would you say I'm writing this letter? The reality is Paul often used a scribe to dictate his letters to. You see this in this letter. You see it in the letter to the Corinthian church as well, where he's dictating his letter to a scribe. This was before you could just tell Siri to go text someone, right? You had to actually have someone. You had to have someone write it down for you. This is what was going on. And in this part of the letter, he's taking the pen from the scribe and he's writing it out himself. Right? And he says, see what large letters I'm writing to you. Now, as I was studying this, it said that one of the options is it could have been like his handwriting was just really big. But have you ever had someone text you in all caps? You guys know what I'm talking about? Like, some people text everything in all caps and you just have to ignore them. But there's other people, when they text in caps, you know that what they're about to say is significant. It's important. It's weighty. So you need to lean in and listen up. So I would encourage you, church, when we get into this next part of the text and Paul's taking the pen from his scribe and he's writing it down in big letters, the encouragement is to lean in and listen up. This is what he says in verse 12. It is those who want to make a good showing in the flesh who would force you to be circumcised, and only in order that they may not be persecuted for the cross of Christ. For even those who are circumcised do not themselves keep the law, but they desire to have you circumcised, that they may boast in your flesh. But far be it from me to boast, except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, by which the world has been crucified to me, and I to the world. For neither circumcision counts for anything, nor uncircumcision, but a new creation. And as for all who walk by this rule, peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Israel of God. From now on, let no one cause me trouble, for I bear on my body the marks of Jesus. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with your spirit, brothers. Amen. Paul is trying to give you a look behind the curtain, a peek behind the scenes, like what is going on in the mind of the Judaizers. Why on earth would they preach this false gospel of circumcision when that's not what God requires? These Judaizers, they had faith in Jesus. They put their faith in Jesus. They believed the resurrection. They wanted to follow Jesus, but they also wanted to uphold their own traditions as well. And not only did they want to uphold the laws and the traditions, they wanted to require them of other people for salvation. So what's going on behind the curtain is that the pursuit of Christ is being sabotaged by lesser pursuits. And it's not just the pursuit of circumcision. There's an underlying pursuit in their life that leads them to preach the message of circumcision. I think Paul touches on three of them. Three lesser pursuits that sabotage their pursuit of God. And I think that we can learn from these things as well. I think there are three pursuits that we can identify in our own lives as well that can keep us from our ultimate pursuit of God as well. So I want to give all three of them, then we'll take them one by one. So the pursuit of security, the pursuit of safety, and the pursuit of success. If you're taking notes, it's just three S's, so it's really easy. Just, security, safety, and success. Let's deal with security first. Paul says this: it's those who want to make a good showing in the flesh who would force you to be circumcised. So circumcision to the Jews was the symbol that they were separated from everyone else. It was the identifier that they were a child of God. If you were a man and you were, for some reason, needed to prove yourself that you were Jewish, you could do that if you were so inclined. If you were circumcised, you were in the family. If you weren't, it meant that you were not in the family. Circumcision gave the Jews a sense of spiritual security. It meant you were in. It was a sign of the relationship the Jews had with God. It represented the promises of God. It was a reminder that they were secure in their relationship with God. But it was a false sense of security. It was a false sense because just because you had this surgical procedure, it doesn't mean that you have a relationship with God, does it? And it doesn't really mean that your relationship with God is all that good or close, does it? Let me give you an example. I'm married. I've got a great relationship with my wife, and I have a wedding ring to prove it, right? So think of how crazy it would be for me to look at my wedding ring, point at my wedding ring, boast and brag in my wedding ring when my relationship with my wife was falling apart and crumbling. The wedding ring doesn't mean diddly squat when my relationship isn't good. It's just an outward expression. It's an outward sign and symbol of an inward relationship. So just because I wear the ring or just because I have the procedure done doesn't mean I've got a healthy relationship, which is why Paul in Romans 2:28 and 29a says this: a person is not a Jew who is one only outwardly, nor is circumcision merely outward and physical. No, a person is a Jew who is one inwardly. And circumcision is a circumcision of the heart by the Spirit, not the written code. So even Paul says it's not a matter of outward appearance, it's what's on the inside that counts. What counts is a circumcision of the heart. What matters most is that your heart is changed, that your heart is transformed. That God does surgery on your heart, not an outward expression. Now, we probably don't get hung up too much on circumcision because most of us aren't Jewish and maybe we don't obsess over that. But we can pursue a sense of spiritual security in the outward rather than the inward, just like these Judaizers. Let me give you a few examples. We can find security in things like church attendance, our upbringing, our political affiliation, the kinds of people we associate with or don't associate with, how much money we give to the church or charitable organizations, how much we serve in the church, how much we read our Bible, what kinds of things we post on social media, what kind of bumper stickers we have on our car, what kind of Bible verse decor you have on your walls at home, whether or not you eat at Chick-fil-A. God. These aren't bad things in and of themselves. Actually, Chick-fil-A could be the reason I have the fitness goals. Oh, never mind. All right. Now, these things aren't bad in and of themselves, but they're just not what secures our relationship with God. They're outward signs of an inward faith, but if we're not careful, we can let this pursuit and false security and outward expressions keep us from really pursuing God inwardly. They can actually keep us from pursuing God. Here's an example. Say God is calling you to give up a habit in your life. You know it's wrong. You've been convicted of it. Let's use it like an example here. Say you have an addiction to pornography, okay? And and you've been convicted of it, and you know that it's wrong, and you're like, man, I got to do something about this. I got to do something about this. I got to do something about it. But rather than do something about it, you distract yourself by upping your giving to the church. Or you distract yourself and you say, well, I'm just going to volunteer more. That'll be good. Or I'm not going to miss a Sunday all season. And rather than dealing with the inward, you focus on the outward. And it actually keeps you from doing business with God, from confessing your sin, repenting, turning back to a loving and gracious and forgiving God. That's how this pursuit of security in the outward can undermine and undercut and sabotage our inward pursuit of God. Finding security in how much you give or how much you serve or how many Bible verses you retweet is a false sense of security. And when we rely on those things, they no longer serve as outward demonstrations of faith, but they serve as distractions from intimacy with God. That's how the pursuit of security in the outward can undercut and sabotage our relationship with God. Or if I could say it this way, the focus on the outward can keep you from dealing with the inward. So, security, a false sense in the outward sense of security. The second thing Paul unpacks is the pursuit of safety. Safety. Anyone like to be safe? It's good. You can be safe. Listen to what Paul says. Verse 12, he says, it is those who want to make a good showing in the flesh who would force you to be circumcised, and only in that, I like this, that they may not be persecuted for the cross of Christ. See, the Judaizers understood that the gospel message was an offensive message, that the cross was an offense to people. And at that time, it was very dangerous to be a Christian. So in pursuit of safety, not being persecuted for their faith, they softened the offense of the cross by preaching the message of circumcision in addition to the cross. Right? These people, they wanted Jesus, but they didn't want to put themselves in danger. They didn't want to be in prison. They didn't want to be stoned to death. They didn't want to be unpopular. They wanted Jesus and they wanted safety. And the problem with this way of thinking is that Jesus and safety don't always go together. And Paul knew that. Not just in his head, but he lived it. He experienced it. He's speaking from experience. Listen to what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 11, 24 through 27. He says, 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews the 40 lashes, less one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea, on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, in danger from robbers, danger from my own people, danger from Gentiles, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers, in toil and hardship through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. Does anyone notice a theme in these verses? What's the line from the robot from Lost in Space? Danger, Will Robinson, danger. Paul knew that there was a risk of danger associated with following Jesus, and anything less than that was a counterfeit pursuit. Even Jesus says, in this world, you'll have trouble. To his disciples, he's saying, you're going to have trouble. Like, he doesn't promise a trouble-free life. He says, you'll have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. He says, foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He said, if you want to come after me, you want to follow after me, you want to get behind me and follow me as your rabbi, there could be danger ahead. There could be danger, there's risk associated with following Jesus. Now, we, today, here in the U.S., we might not ever be in danger of getting stoned to death or being shipwrecked at sea, but I think some of us have an obsession with safety. Think about it. That's what we pray for most, isn't it? We pray for safe travels. We pray for a safe youth missions trip. We pray for safety all the time, and I'm all about safe travels, but by no means is it wrong to pray for safety. We want to pray for safe travels, and we want to have safe missions trips, and we want to have safety. But do we ever let safety get in the way of our pursuit of Jesus? Like if safety is our underlying pursuit, it will impact how we respond to God's call in our life. If God told you to go to another country and share the gospel, would you go? If God told you to minister to the needy in your community, even if it was in a sketchy neighborhood, would you go? If God told you to welcome a stranger into your home, would you do it? If God told you to sacrificially give to the church or to a missions project or to a friend in need, would you, even if it was a stretch financially, would you do it? Or would you say that's not safe? What if God was telling you to stand up for what is right and good and true, even if it's not the popular opinion? What if saying yes to Jesus meant going against the grain or the cultural current? What if saying yes to Jesus meant being in the minority? Because if safety is our pursuit in life, we will be tempted, just like the Judaizers, to bend the word of God, to twist the truth, to be slow to obey, to play it safe, and to cave, rather than to stand up for truth and justice and answer the call of God. Now, I will say this, saying yes to Jesus doesn't give anyone license to be unloving or unkind or a jerk. But there is a freedom that comes from wholeheartedly following Jesus. And it's a freedom from the need to be safe. Another one of our values that I really love, we put it up on the wall because we want it lived out in the life of our church, is playing it safe is risky. Playing it safe is risky. It's the one with the cards and the dice. We will be faithful and willing to do whatever, whenever, wherever God calls us. We want to be people who put our yes on the table even when it's risky. So, church, the pursuit of safety can undercut, undermine, sabotage a pursuit of God. And lastly, Paul talks about the pursuit of success. Success. Paul says in verse 13, "For even those who are circumcised do not themselves keep the law, but they desire to have you circumcised, that they may boast in your flesh." One of the underlying motives for the Judaizers to preach circumcision was to boast or brag in their own successes, that they were able to convert Gentiles over to Judaism. They wanted to brag. They wanted to feel accomplished. They wanted to feel successful, and they wanted everyone to know it. But this pursuit of success was in direct opposition to the gospel of Jesus. It's direct opposition. Listen to what Jesus says in Matthew 20, verse 25. He says, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them, but it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave." So what Jesus is saying, that the way of the Christian will be different than the way of the world, that the way we see success will be different than the way the world sees success, because Jesus knows there's a drive in every single one of us to pursue greatness, to achieve greatness. There's something in us that wants to be known for greatness. And he speaks to that. He speaks to that motive in our heart. And he says, you want to be great? Be like a servant. Why does he use a servant as an example? Well, because servants are not known for being all that great, right? A servant does what everyone else doesn't want to do. The servant is the lowly person. The servant doesn't accomplish big things. The servant does little things. Servants are not known for greatness. Like when you're in kindergarten and you're 5 years old and your teacher asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? No one ever says, I want to be a servant, right? They say, I want to be a police officer. I want to be a fireman. I want to be the president of the United States. They want to be great. They don't want to be less. right? There's something deep in us that wants to be great. And Jesus says, well, the way of greatness is actually to be a servant. Each of us has an idea in our heads what success means. And if we make success our ultimate pursuit, it will sabotage our pursuit of God. Let me give you a few for instances. For some of us, success means getting a good job. For some of us, success means making a certain amount of money. And maybe you had that idea in your mind, and you're like, man, when I make this much money, I'll be good and I'll be set. And maybe that's changed throughout the years. For some of us, success means marrying, having kids, buying a home. For some of it, it means owning your own business. For others, success is seen in the kind of house or the car you drive or the places you vacation. For some, success is having a certain amount of money saved for retirement. For others, success is how your kids turn out and how long you've been married. For some, success is trying your hardest to live up to your parents' expectations. And for others, it's trying your hardest not to repeat your parents' mistakes. There's a lot of ways to define success. But at the end of the day, success is found when we say, I've made it. Right? Like it's just like I've arrived, I've made it. I've made it. But Jesus says success is wrapped up in being a servant. And I think the reason he uses the servant as the ideal is because the servant trusts the master to define success. The master says, clean the floor. And to the servant, when he cleans the floor, he's achieved success. When the master says, wash the feet, and the servant washes the feet, he has achieved success. So the servant doesn't really determine what success is in his own mind. He allows the master to determine success for him. So at the end of the day, success isn't really when we say, I've made it. Success looks a lot more like obedience to the master. Obedience to the master. The same is true of a Christian. We cannot pursue God's picture of success when we secretly want to pursue our own goals, our own dreams, and our own ambitions. Jesus says in the gospel, you can't have two masters, right? You gotta love one and you gotta hate the other. You gotta serve one, you gotta hate the other one. Why? Because at some point, those masters will be in conflict with each other. They're gonna butt heads with each other, and one of them has to win. One of them has to be number one. One of them has to be your ultimate pursuit in life. And the reality is, there is no part of your life that Jesus does not want access to. Maybe you've heard this expression before. Jesus is either Lord of all, or he's not Lord at all. He wants access to every single part of who you are. I heard a story recently, a story about history in the Middle Ages. The knights would get baptized. I don't know if this is true, so don't go look it up, okay? But it's a great story, okay? Let's just leave it at that. It's a good story. The knights would go and get baptized in their full armor. And when they got baptized, they would hold up their sword in the air, as if to say, I'm going to baptize everything but this. I'm going to give you, God, I'm going to give you all of it, but this is the part that you cannot have. You can't have the sword. You can't have the thing that I do violence with. You can't have the thing that I commit war with. You can't have this part of me. I wonder sometimes if we do the same thing. God, you can have access to all of me except the one thing. We're not going to baptize that part. You cannot serve two masters. I think this is why The story of Jesus and the rich young ruler comes to mind. When he says, Master, what must I do? What do I do to get in? How do I get into heaven? How do I get into the kingdom of God? What must I do? And he says, sell all you have and give it to the poor. Now, Jesus didn't tell every single person to sell all they have and give it to the poor. He allowed a lot of people, a lot of his disciples, to be rich and to be generous. But this guy had to sell all he had and give it to the poor. Why? Because it was the one thing he was unwilling to do. It was the one thing that kept him from following and having Jesus as master. So we cannot pursue our own version of success while wholeheartedly pursuing a relationship with Jesus. Security, safety, success. The three pursuits that will ruin our pursuit of God. So the question is, what do we do about it? What can we do about it? Right? Because it sounds like these things are so prevalent, right? How do we make God our singular pursuit? I think the answer, Paul gives it to us in verse 14, where he says this, but far be it from me to boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, by which the world has been crucified to me and I to the world. Listen to what Paul is saying. He says, I'll only boast in the cross. I'll only boast in the cross, not security, not safety, not success. I'm not going to take pride in my church attendance or my religious piety. I'm not going to brag about how safe I've made my life and how insulated I've made my life from the dangers around me by my income and where I live and who I surround myself with. I'm not going to dwell on my own successes, but I'm going to let the master determine my success. And the reason I can't boast in those things is because I've nailed them to the cross. I've nailed them to the cross. He says, the world has been crucified to me. When Paul received the message of the gospel that Jesus died on the cross for his sins, it's as if all the desires, all the stuff, all the lures of the world were put up on the cross with Jesus, and they died and they were rendered powerless over Paul. There was a time before he was a Christian that these things had a grip and a hold on his life, and they were lesser pursuits that sabotaged, that got in the way of his pursuit of God. But when he met Jesus, it's as if those things were nailed to the cross and rendered powerless. So, church, just like Paul, those things in our life have to die. They have to be rendered powerless. So what is it for you? If you were just to think and reflect, and do you pursue safety? Do you pursue this false sense of security in the outward? Is it success, your own vision of success? What is it that competes with the pursuit of God? Would you be willing to nail it to the cross? And I understand that that's not easy to do. These are deep, deep things. But I'm so glad that there's a promise in it. There's good news for us when we do that. If I could say it this way, when Jesus becomes your only pursuit, you will find everything you need in him. You'll find everything you need in Jesus. And you think, well, but everything? Not everything. Maybe some things. Maybe my religion, I'll find that, or my spirituality, right? Or my social networks. No, everything will be found in him. When Jesus becomes your only pursuit, you will find security in him. Not in the external trappings of religion, but in Christ and his finished work on the cross. Your security will be found in him. Not in when Jesus becomes your only pursuit, you'll find your safety in him. Like Jesus will be your sanctuary. When you have no place else to go and life is not safe, Jesus will be your sanctuary. And when Jesus becomes your only pursuit, you will find your successes in him, not in your own accomplishments. But along with Paul, you'll be able to say, I boast in Christ alone. I'm incredibly grateful that in Christ, there's no death without a resurrection. So when we nail these things to the cross, like this invitation, right, to come and die, to lay our life down, to lay our own pursuits down, to lay the things of this world down, there's a resurrection. The way that Paul uses the word new creation. Listen to what he says in verse 15. Is it up there? Maybe it's not up there. Verse 15. There it is. For neither circumcision counts for anything, nor uncircumcision, but a new creation. A new creation. This has been one of the themes throughout the book of Galatians. It kind of brings to mind the creation story in in Genesis, where God creates something out of nothing. He doesn't need any help. He's not transforming something. He's not like working the world like Play-Doh. He's not making it into something new. It was all there, and then he just turned it into something. He made it out of nothing. It's completely new. The Greek word for new literally means previously unknown, like new of its kind, like it never existed before. And this is the thrust of the letter from Paul. It's not just about outward expression of faith tied to religious works like circumcision. It's about an inward transformation of the heart that only God can do. Just like God created the world from nothing, he took you, who had nothing really of value to contribute, and he did something new in you. And he recreated, and he changed your desires, and he changed your mind, and he changed your motives, and he changed your heart, and he transformed it to be something completely new, as if something had never existed before. And that's the beauty. God changes our hearts and our desires and our attitudes and our behavior, and it's rooted in a new creation, not just religious tradition. So the good news today, church, is that when obedience to God seems impossible, just know that God is not asking you to do something that you can't do. He saved you, he's redeemed you, he's given you a new heart, he's given you a new identity, and he's equipped you for every good work. Would you choose to follow him in obedience? To lay down all the stuff and follow him. I want to call the worship teams forward as we close in prayer. Father God, we thank you for making us a new creation. That the old is done and passed away, but behold, all things have come and they're new. God, we don't have to deal with the old stuff. We got power over those things. And God, I'm reminded that there's no part of me that you do not want to have access to. And this journey of faith where we're just constantly bidding ourselves come and die. We're constantly laying our life down, constantly laying down our own selfish desires and our own motives and our own stuff and our own pursuits. God, let us not be tripped up and sabotaged by the lesser pursuit. But God, let us find our all in you. God, that the things of this world would just lose their grip, lose their desire, lose their lure, and lose that sense of like, it's not shiny anymore. I don't want it anymore. I want you. God, we pray that you would do what only you can do. In Jesus' name, amen.